Marley was dead, to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was dead as a doornail.
I don't know what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might be inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade.
But the wisdom of our ancestors is in that simile, and my unhallowed hand shall not disturb it, or the country's done for. Therefore, I repeat that old Marley was dead as a doornail.
Scrooge knew he was.
Of course he did.
Scrooge and Marley were partners for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole beneficiary, his sole friend, his sole mourner, and even Scrooge wasn't dreadfully cut up about the sad event.
But back to the point I started from. There is no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be understood, or nothing wonderful can come of this story. If we were not convinced that Hamlet's father died before the play began, there would have been nothing more extraordinary in his taking a stroll at night than there would any other middle-aged man's rashly turning out after dark in a breezy spot.
Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name, however. There it yet stood, years afterwards, above the warehouse door, Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge Scrooge, and sometimes Marley. He answered to both names. It was all the same to him.
Oh, Scrooge was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, a squeezing, wrenching, clutching, covetous old sinner. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped at his pointed nose, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly from his grating voice.
External heat and cold had very little influence on him. Foul weather didn't know where to have him. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say, "What gladsome looks! My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?"
But what did Scrooge care? To edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance, was the very thing he liked.
Once upon a Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting, foggy weather, and the city clocks had only just gone 3. But it was quite dark already. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal.
But he couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room, and so as surely as the clerk picked up the shovel, the master predicted that it would be necessary for them to part.
Wherefore the clerk put on his white comforter and tried to warm himself at the candle, in which effort, not being a man of strong imagination, he failed.
A Merry Christmas, Uncle. God save you.
It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew who came upon him so quickly that this was the first intimation he had of his approach.
Bah! Humbug!
Christmas? A humbug? Uncle, you don't mean that. I'm sure.
I do. Merry Christmas. What right have you to be merry? You're poor enough.
Come then. What right have you to be morose? You're rich enough.
Out upon Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older and not a penny richer. If I had my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart.
Uncle!
Nephew, keep your Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mine.
Keep it? But you don't keep it.
Let me leave it alone then. Much good may it do you, much good has it ever done you.
There are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited. I dare say, Christmas among the rest. But I'm sure I've always thought of Christmas time, apart from the veneration due to its sacred origin, as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time, the only time I know of when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely and to think of people below them as if they were really fellow travelers to the grave and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though as it was never a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good and will do me good. And I say, God bless it.
If I hear another sound from you, you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir. I wonder you don't go into Parliament.
Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow. We're having a gathering in honor of the city.
I'll see you dead first.
But why?
Why did you get married?
Because I fell in love.
Because you fell in love. Good afternoon.
But Uncle, you never came to see me before that happened. Why give it as a reason for not coming now?
Good afternoon.
I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends?
Good afternoon.
I am sorry, with all my heart, to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel, to which I have been a party, but I have made the trial homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. So, a Merry Christmas, Uncle.
Good afternoon.
And a Happy New Year.
Do-do-do-do. People look east, the time is near of the calling of the year. Make your house far as you are able, trim the hearth and set the table. People look east and sing today, love the guest is on the way.
Scrooge's poor clerk, upon letting out the nephew, let two other people in. Two merry gentlewomen, pleasant to behold, now stood in Scrooge's office.
Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?
Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night.
We have no doubt his liberty is matched by his surviving partner.
At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is especially desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at this time. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comfort, sir.
Are there no prisons?
Plenty of prisons, sir, but they scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind or body to the unoffending multitude. A few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We choose this time because it is a time of all others when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for?
Nothing.
You wish to be anonymous?
I wish to be left alone. You asked me what I wish for, and that is my answer. I don't make merry at myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the prisons and the workhouses, and those who are badly off must go there.
Many can't go there, and many would rather die.
If they would rather die, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population.
Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened so that the ancient tower of the church became invisible, and struck the hours and quarters in the clouds, with tremulous vibrations afterwards, as if its teeth were chattering in its frozen head up there.
The cold became intense, piercing, biting cold. If the good St. Dunstan had but nipped the evil one's nose with a touch of such weather as that, then indeed he would have roared to lusty purpose.
The owners of several scant young noses stooped down at Scrooge's keyhole to regale him with a Christmas carol. We wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Bah!
The hour of shutting up the counting house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge admitted the fact to the expectant clerk in the tank, who instantly snuffed his candle out and put on his hat.
You'll want all day off tomorrow, I suppose.
If it's quite convenient, sir.
It is not convenient, and it is not fair. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you'd think yourself mighty ill-used, I'll be bound.
Yes, sir.
And yet, you do not think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work.
It's only once a year,
A
sir.
poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier next morning.
The clerk promised that he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling. Bob Cratchit, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no greatcoat, went down a slide at the end of a lane of boys 20 times in honor of its being Christmas Eve, and then ran home as hard as he could pelt.
Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, he went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. The building was old and dreary, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge.
Now, there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door of this house, except that it was very large. Also, that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence in that place.
And yet Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without its undergoing any intermediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face.
Marley's face with a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It looked to Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up upon its ghostly forehead. As Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again.
Scrooge fastened the door and walked across the hall and up the stairs, slowly, too, trimming his candle as he went. Up Scrooge went, not caring a button for its being very dark.
Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it.
He walked through his rooms to see that all was right. Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table, a small fire in the grate, spoon and basin ready, and the little saucepan of gruel upon the hob.
Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in, double locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus secured against surprise, he sat down before the very low fire to take his gruel.
His glance happened to rest upon a bell, a disused bell that hung in the room, and communicated, for some purpose now forgotten, with a chamber in the highest story of the building.
It was with great astonishment and with a strange, inexplicable dread that as he looked, he saw this bell begin to swing. Soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house.
This was succeeded by a clanking noise deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks in the wine merchant's cellar. Then he heard the noise much louder, on the floors below, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door.
It came on through the heavy door. And a specter passed into the room before his eyes, and upon its coming in, the dying flame leaped up, as though it cried, "I know him, Marley's ghost."
The same face, the very same. Marley in his usual waistcoat, tights, and boots. His body was transparent, so that Scrooge, observing him and looking through his waistcoat, could see the 2 buttons on his coat behind.
Scrooge had often heard it said that Marley had no bowels, but he never believed it till now.
No, nor did he even believe it now. Though he saw the phantom standing before him, though he felt the chilling influence of his death-cold eyes, he was still incredulous.
How now? What do you want with me?
Much.
Who are you?
Ask me who I was.
Who were you then?
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley.
Can you sit down?
I can.
Do it then.
You don't believe in me.
I don't.
Why do you doubt your senses?
Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are.
Scrooge was not much in the habit of cracking jokes. The truth is that he tried to be smart as a means of distracting his own attention and keeping down his horror.
But how much greater was his horror when the phantom, taking off the bandage round its head, as if it were too warm to wear indoors, its lower jaw dropped down upon its breast.
Mercy! Dreadful apparition! Why do you trouble me? Why do spirits walk the earth? Why do they come to me?
It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. I cannot tell you all that I would. A very little more is permitted to me. I cannot rest, I cannot stay, I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house. Mark me, in life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole. And weary journeys lie ahead of me.
7 years dead, and traveling all that time. You travel fast?
On the wings of the wind.
You might have gone over a great quantity of ground in 7 years.
Oh, blind man, not to know that ages of incessant labor by mortal creatures for this earth must pass into eternity before the good of which it is susceptible is all developed. Not to know that any Christian spirit working kindly in its little sphere, whatever it may be, will find its mortal life too short for its vast means of usefulness. Not to know that no space of regret can make amends for one life's opportunities misused. Yet I was like this man. I was once like this man.
But you were always a good man of business, Jacob.
Business? Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business.
Scrooge was very much dismayed to hear the specter going on at this rate, and began to quake exceedingly.
Hear me, my time is short.
I will, but don't be hard upon me. Don't be flowery, Jacob. Pray.
I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and a hope of escaping my fate. A chance and hope of my procuring, Ebenezer.
You were always such a good friend to me. Thank you.
You will be haunted by 3 spirits.
Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob? I think I'd rather not.
Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow night when the bell tolls 1. Expect the second on the next night at the same hour. The third upon the next night when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and look that for your own sake you remember what has passed between us.
The phantom floated out into the night.
When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that looking out of bed, he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber, until suddenly the church clock tolled a deep, dull, hollow, melancholy 1.
Light flashed up in the room upon the instant, and Scrooge was confronted by a strange figure, like a child.
Yet not so like a child as like an old person, viewed through some supernatural medium, which gave it the appearance of having receded from view and being diminished to a child's proportions. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle upon it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and in contradiction of that wintry emblem, had its dress trimmed with summer flowers.
Are you the spirit whose coming was foretold to me?
I am.
Who and what are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past?
No, your past. Rise and walk with me.
It would have been in vain for Scrooge to plead that his bed was warm and the thermometer a long way below freezing, that he was clad only in his nightgown and cap, and that he had a cold upon him at that time. The grasp of the Spirit was not to be resisted. They passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road with fields on either hand. The city had entirely vanished. It was a clear, cold winter day with snow upon the ground.
Good heaven. I was bred in this place. I was a boy here.
These are but shadows of things that have
The Spirit gazed upon him mildly. Scrooge suddenly was conscious of 1,000 odors floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and cares long, long forgotten.
Some shaggy ponies now were seen trotting towards them, with boys upon their backs, who called to other boys in country jigs and carts driven by farmers. All these boys were in great spirits and shouted to each other until the broad fields were so full of merry music that the crisp air laughed to hear it.
Scrooge knew and named them, everyone. Why did his cold heart leap up as they went past? Why was he filled with gladness when he heard them give each other Merry Christmas as they parted for their several homes?
What was Merry Christmas to Scrooge? Out upon Merry Christmas, what good had it ever done for him?
The schoolhouse is not quite deserted. A solitary child is left there still.
Scrooge knew it.
They left the high road by a road that Scrooge remembered well, and soon approached a mansion of dull red brick. Entering the dreary main hall and glancing through the open doors of many rooms, they found them poorly furnished, cold, and vast.
They went, the ghost and Scrooge, to a door at the back of the house that revealed a large, bare, melancholy room. At a desk by a feeble fire, a lonely boy sat reading. There he was, alone again. When all the other boys had gone home for the jolly holidays, Scrooge wept to see his former forgotten self as he had used to be.
Suddenly, a door opened, and a little girl came darting in and threw her arms about his neck.
I have come to bring you home, dear brother, to bring you home, home, home.
Home, little Fan?
Yes, home for all, home for good and all. Home forever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be. That home is like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one night that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home. And he said, yes, you should, and sent me in to coach you, to bring you where to be together all Christmas and have the merriest time in the world.
Then she began to drag him in her childish eagerness toward the door.
You're quite a woman, dear Fan.
Always a delicate creature, whom a breath might have withered. But she had a large heart.
So she had. You're right, Spirit. I'm not going to say it. God forbid.
She died a woman, and I think had children.
One child.
True. Your nephew.
The scene changed. Scrooge and the Spirit now stood in the busy thoroughfares of a city. It was Christmas time. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it.
Know it? Was I apprentice here? Why, it's old Fezziwig. Bless his heart, it's Fezziwig alive again.
Old Fezziwig looked up at the clock, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, laughed all over himself from his shoes to his face, and called out in a comfortable, oily, rich, fat, jovial voice,
Yo-ho there, Ebenezer. Dick?
Dick Wilkins, to be sure. My old fellow apprentice. Bless me, yes, there he is. He was very he was. Dear Dick, dear.
Yo-ho, my boys. No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas Eve, Ebenezer. Clear away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here.
Clear away? There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away, or couldn't have cleared away. With old Fezziwig looking on, it was done in a minute. Every piece of furniture was packed off. The floor was swept and watered. Fuel was heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was as snug and warm and dry and bright a ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night.
There were dances, and there were forfeits, and more dances, and there was cake, and there was a great piece of cold roast, and there was a great piece of cold boiled, and there were mince pies and plenty of beer. But the great effect of the evening came after the roast and boiled, when the merry dance began.
God rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. Remember Christ our Savior was born on Christmas Day to save us all from Satan's power when we were gone astray. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy, oh, tidings of comfort and joy.
When the clock struck 11, the ball broke up. Old Fezziwig happily took his station beside the door and, shaking hands with every person individually as he or she went out, wished him or her a Merry Christmas.
A Merry Christmas, my friends. A very Merry Christmas to you.
When everybody had retired but the two prentices, they did the same to them, and thus the cheerful voices died away, and the lads were left to lock up the warehouse and loudly proclaim the generosity and benevolence of their employer.
During this whole scene, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in this scene and with his former self. It was not until now that he remembered the ghost. Scrooge suddenly became aware that it was looking full upon him.
A small matter to make these silly folks so full of gratitude.
Small?
He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money, 3 or 4 perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves this praise?
It isn't that. It isn't that. Spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks, and things so slight and insignificant that it is possible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune.
What is the matter?
Nothing particular.
Something, I think.
No. I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now, that is all.
My time grows short. Quick.
There came upon the midnight clear that glorious song of old, from angels bending near the earth to touch their hearts of gold. Peace on the earth, goodwill to men, from hands of gracious King. The world in solemn stillness lay to hear the angels sing.
Scrooge now saw a room, a chamber he knew well, for in this place he had spent many happy hours. A fair young girl was there, wearing a mourning dress. and there were tears in her eyes. The sad eyes sparkled in the light that shone out of the ghost of Christmas past.
Belle!
You fear the world so much, Ebenezer. I've watched your nobler aspirations fall off one by one until your greatest passion, greed, engrosses you.
Spirit, please, show me no more.
Our engagement is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so. You are changed. When it was made, you were another man. Another idol has displaced me.
Spirit, conduct me home. I can bear no more.
The relentless ghost pinioned him in both its arms and forced him to remain.
You may, and I half wish you do, find pain in this for a very, very brief time, and then you will dismiss the memory as an unprofitable dream from which you are glad to have awakened. May you be happy in the life that you have chosen.
Spirit, remove me from this place. Why do you delight to torture me?
I told you these were shadows of the things that have been. They are what they are. Do not blame me.
Remove me, I cannot bear it. Leave me, haunt me no longer.
As Scrooge struggled with the spirit, he was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further of being in his own bedroom. He had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep.
Scrooge awoke in his bedroom. There was no doubt about that, but it had undergone a surprising transformation.
Heaped upon the floor to form a kind of throne were turkeys, geese, great joints of meat, suckling pigs, mince pies, plum puddings, red-hot chestnuts, luscious pears, immense twelfth cakes, and great bowls of punch.
In easy state upon his couch, there sat a giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch in shape not unlike Plenty's horn, and who raised it high to shed its light on Scrooge as he sat up suddenly in bed.
Come and know me better, man. I am the ghost of Christmas present. Well, look upon me. You have never seen the like of me before.
Never.
I've never walked forth with the younger members of my family, meaning, for I am very young, my elder brothers born in these late years.
I don't think I have. I'm afraid I have not. Have you had many brothers, Spirit?
More than 1,800.
A tremendous family to provide for. Spirit, conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and I learned a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you had aught to teach me, let me profit by it.
Touch my robe.
Bring me flesh and bring me wine, bring me pine logs thither. Thou and I will see him dine when we bear them thither. Page and monarch, forth they went together, through the rude wind's wild lament and the bitter weather. Suddenly, they were in the city streets upon a snowy Christmas morning. There was nothing very cheerful in the climate or the town, and yet was there an air of cheerfulness abroad that the brightest summer sun might have endeavored to diffuse in vain. The steeples called good people all, to church and chapel, and away they came, flocking through the streets in their best clothes and with their gayest faces.
The sight of these poor revelers appeared to interest the spirit very much, for he sprinkled incense from his torch on the people as they passed.
And it was a very uncommon kind of torch, for once or twice, when there were angry words between some dinner carriers who had jostled each other, he shed a few drops on them from it, and their good humor was restored directly. For they said it was a shame to quarrel upon Christmas Day.
And so it was.
God love it, so it was.
Spirit, is there a particular flavor in what you sprinkle from your torch?
There is. My own.
Would it apply to any kind of dinner on this day?
To any kind of given. To a poor one most.
Why to a poor one?
Because it needs it most.
Scrooge and the ghost passed on, invisible, straight to Scrooge's clerks. And on the threshold of the door, the spirit smiled and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling with the sprinklings of his torch.
Think of that. Bob had but 15 bob a week himself. He pocketed on Saturdays but 15 copies of his Christian name, and yet the ghost of Christmas present blessed his 4-roomed house.
Mrs. Cratchit, Bob's wife, was dressed out but poorly in a twice-turned gown, brave in ribbons, which are cheap and make a goodly show for sixpence. Belinda Cratchit, second of her daughters, was also brave in ribbons. Master Peter Cratchit, the eldest son, wore his father's tie in honor of the day.
Whatever has got your father then, and your brother, Tiny Tim? And Martha warn't as late last Christmas, not by half an hour.
Here's Martha, Mother. Hurrah!
There's such a goose, Martha.
Why, bless your heart alive, my dear, how late you are. Well, never mind, so long as you have come. Sit down by the fire, dear, and have a warm. Lord bless thee.
No, there's Father coming. Hide, Martha, hide.
Yes, hide, Martha.
So Martha hid herself, and in came little Bob with his threadbare clothes darned up and brushed to look seasonable, and Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Alas, for Tiny Tim, he bore a little crutch, and his limbs were supported by an iron frame.
Why, where's our Martha?
Not coming.
Not coming? Not coming on Christmas Day?
Merry Christmas, Father.
Martha, my girl, Merry Christmas.
Tim, come to the wash house and see the pudding.
It's such a pudding.
And how did Tiny Tim behave?
As good as gold, and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much, and he thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped that people saw him in the church, because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant for them to remember upon Christmas Day who made the lame beggars walk and blind men see.
Bob's voice trembled when he told them this, and trembled more when he said that Tiny Tim was growing strong and hearty.
Peter mashed the potatoes with incredible vigor. Miss Belinda crammed the spoon into her mouth, lest she should shriek for goose before her turn came to be helped.
At last, grace was said. It was succeeded by a breathless pause, as Mrs. Cratchit, looking slowly all along the carving knife, prepared to plunge it in the breast. But when she did, and when the long-expected gush of stuffing issued forth, one murmur of delight arose all round the board, and even Tiny Tim, excited by the 2 young Cratchits, beat on the table with the handle of his knife and feebly cried,
Hurrah!
There never was such a goose.
My dear, I don't believe there ever was such a goose.
Its tenderness and flavor, size and cheapness were the themes of universal admiration. Eked out by applesauce and mashed potatoes, it was a sufficient dinner for the whole family.
A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us.
God bless us.
God bless us, everyone.
It's not over. Tim sat very close to his father's side upon his little stool. Bob held his withered little hand in his, as if he loved the child and wished to keep him by his side and dreaded that he might be taken from him.
Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant seat in this house. I see a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die.
No. Kind Spirit, say he will be spared.
If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other of my race will find him here. What then? If he be like to die, he had better do it and decrease the surplus population.
Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words quoted by the Spirit and was overcome by penitence and grief.
Man, forbear that wicked cant until you have discovered what the surplus is and where it is. Will you decide that men shall live, and what men shall live, and what men shall die? It may be that in the sight of heaven you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child. Oh God, to hear the insect on the leaf pronouncing too much life among his hungry brothers in the dust.
Scrooge bent before the ghost's rebuke, and trembling cast his eyes upon the ground. But he raised them speedily on hearing his own name.
Mr. Scrooge, I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
The founder of the feast, indeed. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast on, and I hope he'd have a good appetite for it.
My dear, the children, Christmas Day.
It must be Christmas Day. I am sure if we are to drink the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you, poor fellow.
My dear, Christmas Day.
I'll drink to his health for your sake, and for the day's, not for his. Long life to him. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and happy, I have no doubt.
The children drank the toast after her. It was the first of their proceedings that had no joy in it. Tiny Tim drank last of all, but he didn't care tuppence for it. Scrooge was the ogre of the family, and the mention of his name cast a dark shadow over the party, which was not dispelled for a full 5 minutes.
After it had passed away, there were 10 times merrier than before, from the mere relief of Scrooge the baleful being done with. The jug went around, and they had a song about a little lost child traveling in the snow from Tiny Tim, who sang it very well indeed.
There was nothing of high mark in this. They were not a handsome family. They were not dressed well. Their shoes were far from being waterproof, and their clothes were scanty. And young Master Peter likely had known the inside of a pawnbroker's. But they were happy, grateful, and contented with the time.
And as they faded and looked happier yet by the light of the bright sprinklings of the Spirit's torch at parting, Scrooge had his eye upon them and upon Tiny Tim until the last. Away in a manger, no crib for his bed, the little Lord Jesus laid down his sweet head. The stars in the bright sky looked down where he lay, the little Lord Jesus asleep on the hay. The scene changed yet again. It was a great surprise to Scrooge to hear a hearty laugh.
It was a much greater surprise to Scrooge to recognize it as his own nephew's, and to find himself in a bright, dry, gleaming room with the Spirit standing smiling by his side and looking at that same nephew.
He said that Christmas was a humbug. As I live, he believed it too.
More shame for him, Fred.
He's a comical old fellow.
That's the truth, and not so pleasant as he might be.
But truly, his offenses carry their own punishment, and so I have nothing to say against it.
I'm sure he's very rich. At least you always tell me so.
Oh, what of that, my dear? His wealth is of no use to him. He doesn't do any good with it. He doesn't make himself comfortable with it.
I have no patience with him, Fred.
Oh, I have. I'm sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself, always. Here, he takes it into his head to dislike us and won't come to dine with us. What's the consequence? He won't lose much of a dinner.
Indeed, I think he loses a very good dinner.
Well, I'm glad to hear it, because I haven't any great faith in these young housekeepers.
Oh, do go on, Fred. He never finishes what he has to say. He is such a ridiculous fellow.
I was only going to say that the consequences of his taking a dislike to us and not making merry with us is, as I think, that he loses some pleasant moments, which could do him no harm.
I'm sure he loses pleasanter companions than he can find in his own thoughts, either in his old office or in his dusty chambers.
And so I mean to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not, for I pity him. He may rail at Christmas till he dies, but he can't help thinking better of it. I defy him. If he finds me going there in good temper year after year, saying, "Uncle Scrooge, how are you?" if it only puts him in the vein to leave his old poor clerk 50 pounds, that's something. And I think I shook him yesterday. And so I say today and every Christmas, here's to my Uncle Scrooge.
To Uncle Scrooge. Uncle Scrooge had become so light of heart that he forgot he was not part of the scene himself. He would have raised a glass to the unconscious company and toasted them in an inaudible speech, but gradually the joyful scene began to vanish before his eyes.
Scrooge and the Spirit saw many other scenes that night. Much they saw and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. The Spirit stood beside sick beds, and they were cheerful. By poverty, and it was rich.
In hospital and jail, in misery's every refuge, where vain man had not made fast the door and barred the Spirit out, he left his blessing and taught Scrooge his precepts.
Suddenly, as they stood together in an open place, the bell struck 12.
Scrooge looked around about him for the ghost and saw it no more. As the last stroke ceased to vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley.
Lifting up his eyes, he beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him.
The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. Its black cloak revealed only one outstretched hand.
I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come.
The spirit did not answer, but pointed downward with one hand.
You are about to show me shadows of things that have not yet happened, but will happen in the time to come. Is that so, Spirit?
The upper portion of the spirit's garments was contracted slightly in its folds, as if the spirit had inclined its head. This was the only answer that Scrooge received. It thrilled Scrooge with a vague, uncertain horror to know that behind that dark shroud there were eyes fixed intently upon him, while he, try as he might, could see nothing but a spectral hand and one great heap of black.
Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any specter I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, I'm prepared to bear you company and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me?
No reply. The hand was pointed straight before them.
Lead on. Lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me, I know. Lead on, Spirit.
They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about them. But there they were, in the heart of it, on the stock exchange, amongst the merchants.
So I'm told. Cold, isn't it? Yes, brother. When did he die? Last night, I believe.
Why, what was the matter with him? I thought he would never die.
God knows.
Well, it's likely to be a very cheap funeral, for upon my life, I don't know of anybody to go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer.
Well, I don't mind going if a lunch is provided. I must be fed.
What has he done with his money?
I haven't heard. Left it to his company, perhaps? He hasn't left it to me, that's all I know. Bye-bye.
Scrooge looked about in that very place for his own image, but another man stood in his accustomed corner, and though the clock pointed to his usual time of day for being there, he did not see himself among the multitudes that poured in through the court.
They left this busy scene and went into an obscure part of the town, to a low shop where iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal were bought. A gray-haired rascal of great age sat smoking his pipe.
Here's a chance we haven't met here. If we haven't met here without meaning it.
You couldn't have met in a better place. You was made free of it long ago, you know. She ain't no stranger. What have you got to settle? What have you got to settle?
Half a minute's patience, Joe, and you shall see. Let the charwoman go first. I was only his laundress. She cleaned up after him.
Every person has a right to take care of himself. He always did. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose.
No, indeed.
If he wanted to keep him after he was dead, wicked old screw, why wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have had someone to look over him when he was struck with death, instead of lying, gasping out his last, alone by himself.
It's the truest word that ever was spoke. It's a judgment on him.
Well, don't just stand there as if you was afraid, woman. Who's the wiser? We ain't gonna pick holes in each other's coats, I suppose.
No, indeed. I should ought not.
Look at these things, old Joe, and let me know the value. Speak out plain. I'm not afraid to go first. Not afraid for her to see it.
What is all this? Bed curtains. Why, it is blankets.
He ain't likely to take cold without him, I dare say.
You may look at that shirt until your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it, nor a threadbare place. It's the best he ever had, and a fine one, too. They'd have wasted it by dressing him all up in it.
Wasted
If it
it?
hadn't been for me.
Wasted it? What do you mean?
Why, Joe, they was gonna bury him in it, don't you see? If calico ain't good enough for such a purpose, it ain't good enough for anything. It's quite as becoming of the body. He can't look uglier than that he did in that one.
You took the shirt off of him lying there?
And why not?
You was born to make your fortune, dearie.
This is the end of it, you see. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive to profit us when he was dead.
Spirit. I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Spirit, let me see some tenderness connected with the death, or that dark chamber will forever be present to me.
The ghost led him through several familiar streets, and as they went, Scrooge looked there, here and there to find himself, but he was nowhere to be seen. At length, they entered poor Bob Cratchit's house and found the mother and children seated around the fire.
Quiet. Very quiet.
The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing. Even the noisiest little Cratchits were as silent and still as statues in a corner, looking up at Peter, who had a book before him.
And he took a child and set him the midst of them.
Where had Scrooge heard those words? He had not dreamed them. The boy must have read them out as he and the spirit crossed the threshold. Why did he not go on?
The mother laid her work upon the table and placed her hands upon her face.
The color, it hurts my eyes.
The color? Poor Tiny Tim.
They're better now again. It makes them weak by candlelight, but I wouldn't show weak eyes to their father when he comes home for the world. It must be near his time.
Past it, rather. But I think he has walked a little slower than he used these last few evenings, Mother.
They were very quiet again. At last she said in a steady, cheerful voice that only faltered once,
I have known him to walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder, very fast indeed.
And so have I often.
And so have I.
But he was very light to carry, and his father loved him so that it was no trouble, no trouble. And there is your father at the door. You went today then, Robert?
Yes, my dear. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised him that I would walk there on a Sunday. My dears, however and whenever we part from one another, I am sure that we shall none of us forget poor Tiny Tim, shall we? Or this first parting that there was among us?
Never, Father.
And when we recollect how patient and how mild he was, although he was a little child, we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves and forget Tiny Tim in doing it.
Never, Father.
And I am very happy.
Mrs. Cratchit kissed him, And his daughters and the smallest Cratchits kissed him, and Peter and himself shook hands.
Spirit of Tiny Tim, thy childish essence was from God.
The ghost of Christmas yet to come led Scrooge again through the streets, into the resorts of businessmen. But in none of these familiar places did Scrooge see himself. Indeed, the spirit did not stay for anything, but hurried straight on towards his desired end, until Scrooge pleaded with him to tarry for a moment.
This court through which we're hurrying now is my place of occupation, and has been for some time. I see the house. Spirit, let me behold what I will be in the days to come.
The spirit stopped. His hand was pointed elsewhere.
The house is yonder. Why do you point that way?
The inexorable finger underwent no change.
Scrooge ran to the window of his office and peered in. The furniture was not his, and the man in the chair was not himself.
And the phantom pointed as before.
Scrooge joined the spirit once again and accompanied it until they reached an iron gate.
A graveyard.
The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. Scrooge advanced toward it, trembling.
Before I draw near to that stone to which you point, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of things that will be? Or are they shadows of things that may be only?
Still, the ghost pointed downward to the grave.
Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends, to which, if preserved in, they must lead. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you show me.
The spirit was immovable.
Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of that neglected grave,
Ebenezer Scrooge.
No, Spirit. Oh, no, no. Spirit, hear me. I am not the man I was.
He clutched at the spirit's robe.
Why show me this if I am past all hope? Assure me that I, yea, may yet change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life.
For the first time, the hand appeared to shake.
I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone.
In his agony, Scrooge caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him.
Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down to a bedpost.
Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own, to make amends in.
No fog, no mist, clear, bright, jovial, stirring cold.
Cold, piping for the blood to dance to.
Golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet fresh air, merry bells.
Oh, glorious, glorious.
What's today?
Hey? Oh, hey?
What's today, my fine fellow?
Today? Why, it's Christmas Day.
It's Christmas Day? I haven't missed it? Hello, my fine fellow.
Hello?
Do you know the poulterers in the next street but one at the corner?
I should hope I did.
No, an intelligent boy. A remarkable boy. Do you know whether they have sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one.
Well, the one as big as me.
What a delightful boy. It's a pleasure to talk to. Yes, my buck.
It's hanging there now.
It is. Go and buy it.
Walker.
No. I am in earnest. Go and buy it and tell them to bring it here that I may give them the direction where to take it. Come back with the man and I'll give you half a crown. I'll send it Bob Cratchit. He shan't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim.
It was a turkey. He never could have stood upon his legs, that bird. He would have snapped them short off in a minute like sticks of sealing wax.
Scrooge dressed himself all in his best and at last got out into the streets. The people by this time were pouring forth as he had seen them with the ghost of Christmas present. And, walking with his hands behind him, Scrooge regarded every one with a delighted smile.
Good morning, sir.
Merry Christmas to you, sir. Merry Christmas.
A very Merry Christmas.
Scrooge said often afterwards that of all the blithe sounds he had ever heard, these were the blithest in his ears.
He had not gone too far when he saw coming towards him the two jolly gentlewomen who had entered his counting house just yesterday. It sent a pang through his heart to think how these ladies would look upon him when they met, but he knew what path lay before him, and he took it.
My dear ladies.
Mr. Scrooge?
Yes, that's my name. And I fear it might not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon, and if you would have the goodness.
Oh, what? Why, bless my soul, gladly, sir, most gladly. But are you certain? We've never had such a large contribution.
Yes. Come and see me tomorrow. Will you come and see me?
Yes. Oh, yes, indeed.
It was clear that they meant to do it.
In the afternoon, he turned his steps towards his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock, but he made a dash and did it.
Is your master home, my dear?
Yes, sir.
Where is he, my love?
He's in the dining room, sir, at the party. I'll show you in if you please.
He knows me. I'll go in, my dear.
He turned the doorknob slowly and sidled his face in and around the door. Everyone was looking at the table, which was spread out in great array.
These young homemakers are always nervous on such points and like to see that everything is right.
Fred.
Why, bless my soul. Who's that?
It's I, your Uncle Scrooge. I've come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?
Let him in. It is a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. His niece looked just the same.
So did the whole merry company, who now raised a glass to Uncle Scrooge and drank to his happiness. Wonderful party, wonderful songs, wonderful unanimity.
Wonderful happiness. Oh, come, all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant. Oh, come ye to Bethlehem. Come and behold him, born the King of angels. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him, Christ the Lord.
Scrooge was early at the office next morning. Oh, he was early there. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late.
That was the thing he had his heart set upon.
And he did it. The clock struck 9.
No Bob.
A quarter past.
No Bob. Bob was a full 18 minutes and a half behind his time.
Scrooge sat with his door wide open that he might see him come into the tank.
Bob's hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen, as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock.
Hello! What do you mean by coming in here this time of day?
I am very sorry, sir. I am behind my time.
Yes, I think you are.
It's only once a year, sir, and it shall not be repeated. I was making Matt rather merry yesterday, sir.
Now, I'll tell you what, my friend. I'm not going to stand for this sort of thing any longer, and therefore, I am going to raise your salary. A Merry Christmas, Bob. A merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family. And we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop. Bob, make up the fires and buy a second scuttle of coal before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father.
He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world.
Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he heeded them not. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him.
It was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge.
May that be truly said of us, and all of us.
And so, as Tiny Tim observed,
God bless us, everyone.
God bless us, everyone.
The Lord is come, let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing. Joy to the Savior reigns. Let us our songs employ, while we
Please do not leave. I need this microphone on, please. Is the microphone on? Yes. Okay. I'm Betsy Pickren. I've been known to start things. And today I'm going to tell you, I'm here as the ghost of A Christmas Carol present. About 4 weeks ago, right out there, I happened to drop the hint that it would be fun if we would do a dramatic reading. There were several people there. One person said, I'll do music. One person said, I'll do wardrobe. Somebody else said, I'll help. Somebody else said, I'll send out emails. And we said, but we don't have a director. So I went inside and I said, not expecting, I said, Glenn, we're going to do a Christmas carol. Would you like to play with us? And Glenn said,
I guess I'll direct it.
So it was born. And Marley, are you coming up here, Mr. Marley? I do want you to. I need Mr. Marley up here.
It came on through the open window. A ghostly appearance.
But you're empty-handed.
And it was tap dancing.
Okay. So
it's ghost wine.
So Mr. Marley and I would like to thank Glenn for directing. We couldn't have done it without him.
Well, I want to thank everybody that did it. Betsy hectored me about it until we decided to do it again. But thanks to Ella, thanks to Tracy. They are the hardest working and smartest people I know. And really, thanks to everybody.
Yes, and we
toss out every day you can think of.
Okay. Well, basically, we have some snacks for you in the back, and we do have gifts for our director, for our wardrobe person, who's Ella, and for our singer who made all the music happen, which is Tracy. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. See you in the back.
And one last time, God bless us, everyone.
God bless us, everyone.